And we're live. Welcome to Josh and Aaron Talk About Stuff. There's Aaron fixing his curtain.
Fixing my curtains.
I'm Josh.
And I'm Aaron.
Welcome, buddy. All right.
How's it going?
Good. It's good. All right. We've come to a really good topic. Well, they're all good topics, but
They're all good topics.
One that we really like to talk about.
Let's face it, we know this one a bit.
So this week it's going to be about 90s alternative and grunge music and bands we like. It's
probably some we don't necessarily like, but
right.
we know that they're worthwhile and worth talking about.
Yep, and it's Mark that left on music. So I guess to start us off here, so we've kind of actually inadvertently set the stage for of what we discussed.
Right? Yeah, we really
did.
Did.
Stage for like a new, I don't know, some big word that I don't know, language arts teacher, like a paradigm shift, if you will, I guess.
So wow, though that was it. That was solid. That was some solid wordage there, buddy. Some solid wordage.
Right. So you got your.
But it was though.
Your beginnings of rock and roll in the 50s, and the Beatles kind of like took it to a totally different level, and then they have a natural progression through the 80s rock. Mm-hmm. And of course there's bands out there that like Led Zeppelin that kind of like set themselves apart and did their own thing,
Right, absolutely.
And then we go ahead.
No, then we kind of roll into the 80s, and the dominant of the 80s was that, like we talked about, the hair metal, that was so much a part of things, the glam rock, or it was this pop and new wave that was sort of going. Yeah. But there was nonetheless kind of under the surface in the 80s, there was this sort of kind of burgeoning scene. And there were these bands that were out there that were doing things that were different and unique, that were just sort of under the surface and kind of ignored and not acknowledged. And then they kind of, all of a sudden things happened. So
like, I guess I don't want to forget my thought here. So I'm just kind of like throw it in there.
Right.
Because we want to talk about kind of like what was going on, in the 80s of the non-mainstream bands. But like, obviously all these bands, they have talent, right? Yes.
Right.
But they had like this formula in the sense of all the songs, they had their guitar solo. It was a very standardized, have a little intro, your verse, chorus, bridge.
Verse. Yeah.
You throw in the guitar solo, and like, well, all these bands they had talent, good is a subjective term. It was like, they didn't really like progress the music as far as like innovation.
Very true.
Right. There was innovation in the 60s. I think it kind of got lost in the 70s a little bit with most bands. And then like, it's not until these alternative bands that we really like that really start to push the envelope again of what we can do music sonically,
Right.
So,
and that's a fantastic point. And I'm glad you got it out there before you forgot it, because it was solid.
Yeah, I don't want to forget the good ones. So like I was doing some reading. So like, I mean, I guess if I had, if everything was a binary choice of like or dislike, I guess I would say I like Soundgarden, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, they had their start in the 80s.
Right.
And they were cutting their teeth. Eddie Vedder was starting his craft in the 80s, and like Mother Love Bone and Mookie Blaylock.
Right. No, it's so funny. Like yesterday we were, I knew we were talking about this, and sort of, I ended up throwing on a couple of albums yesterday and listening through them, and just be honestly, more than anything, just because I wanted to hear them, and knowing that we were talking about this made it particularly apropos. And it was, I was listening to actually both the Unplugged, there's the Nirvana Unplugged and Pearl Jam Unplugged, which I think are the two best Unplugged shows that MTV ever did, but that's another topic for another time. But anyway, I was listening to those, and then I was looking at something else and reading something, and can't remember what I was looking at, but stumbled upon just something about Temple of the Dog. And when you get down to it, in a way, Temple of the Dog was sort of like, that's Hunger Strike. That video was sort of like everywhere, and it was there before a lot of these others, because, and I'm getting back around to what you were saying, sorry, kind of in a roundabout way. But Soundgarden was cutting their teeth in there in the late '80s. They were kind of the first of the grunge bands of the Seattle scene to actually cut an album. I think they were the first ones to actually officially cut an album. Maybe
I think they had 2 albums prior to '91. I think
right.
Bad Motorfinger in '91 was their third, so they were
had done
their
some
name.
They had done some stuff, just particularly in that Seattle geographic, where they were known. There wasn't that national knowledge, and Mother Love Bone was the band that I love their name for one thing. I just think it's a fantastic freaking name, right. Mother Love Bone. Mother Love Bone was the band that everybody thought was going to be the explosive band because they had, I guess, signed a major record deal, like with a major label. And people were like, this is it. This is the band that's going to take Seattle's music scene and push it out into the general consensus and the general knowledge. And then their lead singer, Andrew Wood, I think it was a heroin overdose, like right before they were supposed to go on tour. And so, he was tight with all these guys. And so Cornell goes, hey, let's do a tribute. And Temple of the Dog is, a couple of guys from Soundgarden and a couple of guys from Mother Love Bone decided to cut a tribute album. And then all of a sudden that's out there. And then Soundgarden continues to do, and then the guys from Mother Love Bone become Pearl Jam. And it's just sort of this sort of steamroll effect.
Right. Yeah. So like, who else? So I mean, like Red Hot Chili Peppers got their start in the '80s, and like, I would actually, kind of throw Metallica in there for alternative because they were definitely not the mainstream.
Yeah, they were not mainstream, and they were not that standard like what you think. Like they were definitely different than I think what a lot of people thought of as like hard rock, heavy metal at the time. Like right. Metallica was doing something different. Nirvana even Bleach came out in '89.
Yep.
So it was kind of starting to bubble beneath the surface in the late '80s. You band and like the Pixies. Like the Pixies, I think a lot of these acts lean back to the Pixies and like Mudhoney. I think they were they were kind of like simmering below the surface in the late '80s.
Yeah, and I think so. Like as far as like alternative, kind of pushing towards emo, a lot of these bands, and rightly so, look to The Cure as an inspiration.
Oh my gosh.
They were like absolutely. A founding father of that type of really like intricate guitar work, way different lyrics than the norm. So we'll talk more as about well The Cure later with the Hall of Fame episode.
Yeah, as well as as well as like REM, I think
they were
absolutely rolling in the '80s. And they were kind of that, and that's us. As we were getting ready to do this, my brother and I were texting back and forth, unrelated to this, but texting back and forth just about '90s music. And it's we jokingly said it's all flannel and misery when we started this, but it really wasn't. I mean, it really wasn't. I mean, yes, the grunge scene was very, like you said, they talked about real stuff, but there was also this sort of kind of alternative college rock scene that REM is sort of the fathers of that wasn't flannel and misery. It was more just like very different music than what was being played on the mainstream.
Right.
Sort of an alternative almost, if you will.
Yep, absolutely. So we got all these bands trying to cut out their niche,
their space.
And it's just
look at us. We're here making music.
We're making really good music.
Yeah.
And like, when 1991 hits, right, at different points of the year, like Temple of the Dog, Hunger Strike was like January of '91. So that's kind of like the precursor to, whoa, there's different music out there, and it sounds like really cool. Because I actually watched that video recently, and it's like.
It's fantastic.
It's it's completely different than like Def Leppard, Motley Crue, and Poison. It's it's kind of like a jab at the '80s.
It almost is, right? And this is back when, and I was thinking about this, is like the music video was a big deal at this point still. Like MTV could make or break a band, and a music video could make or break a band.
Yeah.
And that's just all there is to it at this point. And so, but you're right though. It's so funny that, like, okay, so the band that my brother and I were talking about, He's like, check out the. He's like, yes, I have an old car. Yes, I have a cassette player. Check out the tape I found. And he sent me a picture. And it was the Spin Doctors.
Oh yeah.
Pocket full of crypto. No, but my point is,
yeah.
no, but my point is, 1991 is when that album came out,
Yep.
and it was everywhere.
It was huge.
And the songs on that album were nothing like what you would listen to kind of up to that point. It was this weird, like, hey, this isn't glam metal, but this isn't pop. This is like kind of different, you know? And you had, like, I think Blues Traveler released like 4 that year. And I think Dave Matthews Band came out that year. So there was like this college alternative rock scene too that was kind of, things were starting to just kind of pop up, you know?
Yep. And then when the wall came crashing down, it opened up the doors to.
It did.
But
and then, yeah, go ahead.
So until recently, I had never really like paid attention to Chris Cornell's voice.
Right.
You know, and so then if you look it up, guys, look up Hunger Strike. And when he just starts singing, you're like, I have never heard that voice before.
Right.
Not like
there's nothing
what's going on at that time.
There's nothing like it.
His
and
a top 10 voice.
I think he's a top. I would say he's a top. I think he's the only person. Honestly, I'll be completely honest. The only person I'd put above him is Freddie Mercury.
As far as like,
in terms of just sheer vocal chops.
Okay.
I don't think there's anybody better than Chris Cornell. Also, maybe Mercury. Yeah. Cornell's voice is just like it's unreal, and he can do things with it that are just like. It's like if I tried to sing like that, my vocal cords would just break.
Well, I mean, just like the tone and awesomeness.
Oh no, it's singing absolutely
without the screaming part. Like he's just like, wow, it's like that is a different style of vocal than what every because in 1991 in the beginning, like those bands the 80s bands are still rolling. It's
absolutely
still killing it, you know, and it's like,
and he's like, yeah, he comes out there with like he can get really high pitched and like kind of wail, you know, but it's like it's not like a wail like you'd ever heard before. There was like this sort of like intensity and like you said, like vocally, the guy was incredible. And what's incredible, and you know, and it's so funny you know, obviously the influence of this music, and this is part of what we're talking about. I know we'll continue to. That's why this music, the influence of this music, just is so profound and continues. Like, I guess last night it was like a headline on the news as I was flipping through the news this morning. This young lady on American Idol last night did Black Hole Sun, of all things. Yeah, and I was like, really? So I played it. Like, yeah, pretty good job, you know. But like that these songs just continue to be there. That's a weird video.
Very weird. Very weird. But like, so I wonder if I don't even know where I was going. Oh, that was the I guess mainstream. Everyone's first introduction to Eddie Vedder too.
And yeah, absolutely, because they hadn't cut 10 at that point.
Yep, and it was like, oh wow, his voice is completely different too.
Yeah, who's this guy? Yeah, what's this guy's voice? Like, I guess what happened is like there were some low notes and Cornell just couldn't hit them, and Eddie had come up, I guess, to sit with like Jeff Ament and Stone Gossard because they're like, you know, talking about forming this band, and they were gonna like. Mookie Blaylock was what they were going to call it.
Right.
Like, yeah, come on up and we'll be a band. It'll be cool. You can sing for us. And he was like, okay. So he comes up and they're like, hey, we got this guy. He can sing low notes. And so Eddie comes in and Eddie sings it. And he and Chris Cornell got to be tight, I guess. And then a few months later, Pearl Jam dropped 10.
Right. It was like very rarely is a debut album. Does it go diamond? That was one of them.
Yeah, it's an incredible. I think it's one of the most successful debut albums of all time.
Yep. So like when I was 10 in 91. So I wasn't like, I didn't really like.
I
didn't really get into like contemporary music until I was like late 90s when I was like late in high school.
Of course.
But like, you know. But like I said before, when I was allowed to start watching MTV, it was just all like girls, 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 and that song, you know, Cherry Pie and all that stuff. And so I'm gonna bring that.
Never gonna let that song go, man. It's gonna be there forever.
Every episode, but like
kind of like that song Cherry Pie,
right? But you know, of course, like I listened to the music my dad liked, the Beatles, or whatever. And so when you're going out there on your own, you're like, and you know, like as huge as like the 80s hair metal that brand was, so was the 80s human man and men and women. There was like this way to be in the 80s.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like if like you said, I think you brought up like Wonder Woman
Wonder
1984.
Woman 84, yeah, like
There's a style to the 80s and how to be like this is
yeah,
how 80s teenagers should be or whatever. And so
and
but
should
but
look and
but not everybody fits that mold.
right.
And the people that didn't fit that mold had to search high and low for music that
And
related to
people.
them that they liked. And so like I can imagine, 1991. I think we have talked about this before. Like when you heard, okay, so like the album that broke
we know what it is.
Nevermind.
And Nevermind broke it. It just it broke it and destroyed it. And
that like 10 came out before it.
And that video, and Jeremy, that video is strikingly stark, and it had been on TV, and it was getting noticed.
It wasn't until the
that
walls
video
were crashing down that there was actually like room for all like,
right.
Because we also agree that so 1991 is the year that changed everything.
Yeah,
because you have the
albums that came out that year are incredible.
We got Nevermind with Nirvana. You got 10 with Pearl Jam. By this time, the Red Hot Chili Peppers are ready to destroy the world, which we'll talk more about next week with Blood Sugar Sex Magic.
Blood Sugar Sex Magic came out that same time.
I get the albums mixed up for REM, but the 1991 album.
I think it's Automatic for the People, but I could be wrong.
With Losing My Religion, right?
Losing My Religion.
That song was huge.
Everywhere.
Soundgarden, Bad Motorfinger, which I mean, Super Unknown is their magnum opus, but they crashed around the scene in 91. But then it kind of leads in 1992, where then you get and Smashing Pumpkins debuted Gish in 91, but then you lead into 92 where you get like the Stone Temple Pilots and then Radiohead gets a smash into the scene, and like now the floodgates are open for rock music.
Now it's totally and that's the thing, and I think because so even these bands that doesn't sound like even these bands didn't sound anything like, and here's the thing, none of these bands sound anything like each other.
Right.
It's not like there's this. So if you played me a Warrant song and a Motley Crue song,
right,
and a Poison song, right, I would not know which band was which, right, unless it was one of the songs I knew. And even
then, I played you non-single tracks. You might be like, "Man, I don't know. They all sound similar."
It was glam metal, but the grunge and alternative movement that started in the '90s, it was like none of them sounded anything alike. But it's like, I mean, Nirvana busted down the door. They did, because let's face it, they did. That video broke MTV. It was. And it opened up this floodgates for all of a sudden, hey, there's music out there and it doesn't sound like anything else. And there's room for all of it. And so, REM sounds nothing like Nirvana, sounds nothing like Pearl Jam, sounds nothing like the Smashing Pumpkins.
Right.
But it just sort of opened for all of them.
Well, another thing I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but like, so
I'm sure you won't
all these glam metal bands, although a lot of them like were born in different parts of the country, they all went to LA, and there's a LA sound. Seattle had its own thing, and they didn't just like run away from Seattle. Chicago was Smashing Pumpkins. Now REM, absolutely. I think Michael Stipe's from Georgia or somewhere.
They're from Athens, Georgia.
So it's like
they're from the city I was born in. Like people would like, I would tell people in college, like, "Oh, where are you born?" I was like, "Athens, Georgia." Are you an REM fan? I'm like, actually, no, I'm not. Right. I was just born in the town.
And while some of these bands
in our blood.
Okay, we got to record the album in LA, but they didn't leave where they came from.
Right.
The glam, and I'm not necessarily saying that like Bret Michaels or Vince Neil left where they came from, but they embraced the LA culture.
It's the LA scene.
So it was like there's a huge like reclaiming of identity with these alternative grunge bands.
That's a really good way to put it.
Like, this is who we are. We're not going to, and another thing is we're not going to compromise on the music we want to make.
This is the music I want to make. I'm going to make it.
And
it'll be honest and it'll be true.
Right. And of course, not every song was like about depression or suicide. It could be random stuff, but like there's always a give and take with the record company producers, but these bands stayed because they knew the product. I think they knew they were making great music,
Mhm.
and especially once you make that one good album, then you like no one can touch you, right? So
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like,
Once you put out the mega hit, it
right.
just becomes easier to go. See, here's how we're going to do this one.
And like music is like this really like I've had this argument with a buddy of mine about between music and sports, how sports is like simulated uh competition. So it's not like really reflective of like nature, but like music is actually science. It's part of the universe. Uh like and so people like when you listen to music, you want to like hear something that's cool and it like means something to you.
Sure.
And people needed something different.
Yeah.
The I guess
Makes
because
sense.
like in 1991, I guess is really when the Generation Xers are really coming of age.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like they don't want to listen to that bullshit anymore.
I mean, it's like
You know what I
it's,
mean?
yeah, exactly. No, I mean, like, and everybody kind of like realized it and embraced the fact that they were Generation X, and
Yeah.
they're like they were the lost, forgotten children, and they wanted something of their own. And I think that's kind of
Yep.
where it all sort of started up.
Yep. Well, okay, so I think we've kind of like talked enough about why this music came about. So next episode we'll talk about the bands that we really like and why.
That didn't take long, did it?
What do you mean? And I
Well, I
mean,
mean, like 20, oh, hey, look, 20 minutes, and we just
yeah, no,
yeah,
man, because we did good. I think we stayed on topic.
fairly well, I
so
think. So next
yeah,
week, next time, we'll talk a little bit more about the bands in
yeah,
depth
why the bands
that
that
we
we
cared
like and why
about.
we like them
Yeah.
and how they're awesome. And then programming note next week, we're gonna talk more in depth about three bands that were of the era, started in the '80s, got huge in the '90s, but were completely different, even than from like the mainstream of alternative, and that would be
Yeah.
Red Hot Chili Peppers, Beastie Boys, and Nine Inch Nails. Are the ones I think are like
They're
hugely really
kind of,
important.
yeah,
So,
they are, and they're outside the norm, definitely.
all right. So, if
Cool,
you
man.
don't know who we like on next episode, you'll know after because we won't, But anyway, all right. I'll see you guys later. Enjoy listening. Bye bye.
Bye.